Welcome back to another Tactical Fly Fisher on the Water video today. Today we're going to talk about sight fishing. So we're on a river here that I love mainly because it's got clear water and you can pretty much always spot fish. And it gives you the opportunity to be a little bit more of a hunter and not just sort of blind covering water. I've got 12 tips here for you today on how to increase your sight fishing success, so let's get right to them. Number one, color is everything. For me, I learned to spot fish by looking for inconsistencies on the bottom and looking around at the color of the bottom and then seeing if something is just a little bit different, a little bit off. Much of the time, brown trout will have a little bit of an orange or yellow type color. Sometimes they'll even have a green aquamarine dorsal surface on them. When it comes to rainbows, I always look for the reds on their cheeks or on their lateral surface, and they often have a really aquamarine back as well. So look for those colors that set them apart from the bottom, and a lot of times you'll be able to spot fish a lot better. And also shadows are a really good thing to look for. That's a color difference as well. And if you look for those differences on the bottom, you'll be able to spot fish better. Number two, learn to read water better. So if you've practiced learning how to read water when you're just blind fishing, all that feeds into your ability to sight fish, because if you know where to look for fish to begin with, where they're most likely to be, then you can focus where you're looking in the river on those areas. Instead of just kind of broadcasting your vision across the whole river, you can look in specific spots where fish are most likely to be, and that's where you're usually going to find them. So really work on your blind fishing first, and once you've worked on your blind fishing and you know where fish hold, you can then look in those types of spots for fish that you can sight fish to. Number three, look for a dark background, or try and get a background that's darker behind where you're looking. So if I'm looking in the middle of the river, I usually have the best vision if I can get some dark trees, like pine trees or something like that, behind where I'm looking. This is really obvious in the winter, because if you have a snowbank or something, you get terrible glare on the water. But if you have a tree that breaks up that snow, all of a sudden you can see wherever that tree is. There's like a narrow window that you can see through with that tree. So I usually look through that window as I'm moving up the river to try and use that as a viewing lane to spot fish. So try and do that when you're out there looking in the water. Number four, spot from where the sun is behind you. So right now the sun is pretty much right over our heads. There's not really a better side at this point. But if the sun is at a point in the day where it's a little bit angled, try and put it behind you. Now, obviously, if you're in a large river where you can't wade, you're going to be limited to whatever bank you're on. But if you're on a smaller river and you can cross to the other bank, try and put that sun behind you. That's going to get you better vision into the water instead of glare coming off of it, and you'll be more likely to be able to spot fish. Number five, get a higher vantage point. So if you can get some elevation over the river, there's a reason why they call it a bird's eye view. Birds can see better into the river because they have that elevated vantage point. They don't even need polarized glasses at that point because there's no glare. So the higher you can get above the river, the easier it is to see into the water. The problem is that also means that it's easier for the fish to see you. So you really have to pay attention. If you're going to climb a boulder, climb a cliff, a hill, a trail, whatever, by the river, you got to make sure it's set back enough from the river that you're not a threat to the fish. If you're climbing boulders out in the middle of the river, you can just about guarantee you're going to spook any fish that you might be trying to sight fish to. So be really careful about when you get that elevation, but if you can get an elevated vantage point, you're going to have a better opportunity to see fish. Number six, wait for windows, and that's in quotes. Wait for windows in the current to help you see into the river. A lot of times when you're looking in turbulent currents, especially in pocket water, things like that, areas of the river like that, it's hard to see into the river to begin with. But if you look at that turbulence, every once in a while, a lot of times there's just a little flat bit of surface that comes down the river, and I call that a window. Lots of other anglers call it that as well. And it gives you a view into what's going on below. And if you wait for those windows, eventually there might be, 30 seconds where you're looking into a heavy run or something, and then you get a 2-second window. And all of a sudden in that 2 seconds, you can see that fish that you've been waiting for, and now you know that it's there. Look for those windows, and a lot of times once you've seen the fish initially, then you can still actually see it once the window's gone away, or at least get glimpses of it. So wait for those windows, and they'll help you see into the water as well. Number 7 is to work as a team with the spotter. This is something I did a lot when we were in New Zealand. We'd put one angler up on the bank, or they'd go up on a bluff above, and they'd spot fish that you couldn't see from the river level, and then they would guide that angler into that fish. And if you have a friend that's good at spotting fish and good at giving directions, take turns with that friend, with that angling buddy, and you get a chance to catch a fish, then he gets a chance to catch a fish, and if you'll work together, you'll actually have more opportunities for each of you to sight fish. Number 8, you need to tread lightly and move slowly. Now, I've talked about this one in some previous videos, but there's a reason why herons are one of the most successful avian predators in the river. It's because they creep along very slowly, and they're extremely patient, and they can get so close to fish, but in a slow manner that the fish doesn't even know they're there. If you do that, you can also creep up on fish that might spook if you were being a little bit more raucous, but also that it gives you more time, if you're moving along very slowly, gives you more time to look through the river and really focus on whether you can see a fish or not. So I take usually a step at a time, maybe even half step, and I'll just pause, look really hard where I'm trying to focus, take one more step, pause. I might move up the river exceptionally slowly. I mean, kind of excruciatingly slowly, and people will look at me thinking I'm crazy. But that really slow, methodical movement lets you get close to fish without spooking them, and also gives you an opportunity to really look and not pass by fish that you could have stopped and seen if you'd just been a little more methodical. Number 9, get as close to the fish as you can without spooking them. So just like when you're Euro nymphing, and you can sight fish when Euro nymphing, but today we're mostly using longer line methods, but with those longer line methods, I want to still be as close to the fish as I can get without spooking them. Because if the less line you have out of your rod, the less line you have to manage, that's less line you got to manipulate through mending, things like that, and the better drift you're going to get. And if you get a better drift, you're more likely to catch that fish. So get as close as you can to a fish without spooking it, and you'll learn over time when you do spook fish where that point is. If you creep up on a fish and you get to a certain step where all of a sudden he goes, well, you now know that was too close, and you know in that type of water, with that type of surface, the next time you see a fish, stay at least a step or two further back. Through that process of iteration, you'll learn when you're too close or when you're just far enough away. Number 10, be willing to make rig adjustments. There's so often where you've got a dry fly on and you're just not willing to take that dry fly off and put a nymph on. Or maybe you've got a nymph on with a certain amount of weight and you're under the fish. And that fish has never seen that fly. And you don't even know it necessarily, but that fly got under that fish to begin with, or it hit the bottom before it got to the fish. If you just take that fly off, put on one bead size smaller, suddenly the next cast you catch the fish. I can't tell you how many times that's happened to me, up or down. Get the right weight when you're sight nymphing, or be willing to put on a dry fly when you see that fish rise. Make a change. Don't be lazy. All it takes is 30 seconds to a minute to make that knot change, and suddenly you have a much better opportunity to catch that fish and not spook it. A lot of times when you spook a fish, it's with an errant cast with the wrong rig, and if you made that change to get the right rig on, you would have a much better chance of getting that fish. Number 11 is make a measurement cast. So when I'm looking at the fish and I've spotted it out in the river, I want to make sure my first cast is perfect. Now, one of the best ways to do that is to pick a target that's the same length away but well off to the side of the fish out of its view. And so I'll make a length cast to that spot, try and hit it with my fly, and then I know I've got the right amount of length to lead that fish with when I go to make that cast. And so then all I have to do, instead of judging the length of my cast as well as horizontally side to side, all I have to do is now redirect that right length of line in front of the fish, depending upon the fish, maybe 3 to 6 feet, something like that, to lead them, maybe even further if you need to sink longer. But being able to have that measurement cast first will get you a lot more accuracy on that first presentation and a better shot at catching that fish. Tip number 12, if you need to make a mend in order to get a drift to a certain fish, try and make that mend in the air, or an aerial mend. Use a reach cast, is what most people would know that as. If the water is clear enough to see fish, splashy mends on that water are often going to spook that fish. Not only that, but if you make a mend and it's too close to a fish, it's going to move your fly really quickly, and it's likely to spook that fish, or at least tell them that that nymph is not natural. So this isn't an issue if you're Euro nymphing to a fish that you can see, but when you're making other presentational methods to a fish, try and use aerial mends in order to set up your drift, and you'll catch more fish. All right, now that you've heard our 12 tips, let's go see if we can put it into practice on the water. Let's go find a fish and we'll see if we can catch it. Okay, there's a fish. He's on top of that bald patch right there. There we go. All right, so I spotted that fish. I got into position. I got as close as I could without spooking him. I made sure I had the right fly weight on. And set it up with a nice cast far enough to get just the right amount of sink time, and all I saw was the fish gave a little white wink. I actually saw it open its mouth when my fly was about near it, and that was the sign to me that I needed to set the hook. And that white wink is probably one of the most satisfying things about sight fishing. It's like getting to watch it eat your dry fly underwater. And obviously if I had rising fish today, I'd be targeting them, but so far there isn't much of a hatch. But thankfully they're still willing to eat nibs. This one just took a little beta perdigon. And we've kind of got 3 or 4 flies that we're rotating through, and if a fish doesn't like the first one, you change it. 3 or 4 casts later, change again. And eventually you find one that works, and that's a nice brown trout. This is the reward of practicing those 12 steps of sight fishing. Really nice brown trout. Let's get it gone. See you later, buddy. Thanks for watching this tactical fly fisher video today. If you liked it, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Hit that little bell icon so that you get a notification when we post new videos. And if you need any fly tying or fly fishing gear, come on over to Tactical Fly Fisher and we'll help you out.